On the presentation.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Kelly Evans. I'm the HOMEARP manager, and I am very excited to be with y'all today. This is our first office hours, and we have had a wonderful response, and we really appreciate that. So I'm going to jump right in. I have a presentation that I'm going to walk through, and I want to be able to make sure that y'all can see that. So Alona, are we good? Can you see the presentation? You're muted.
Yes, we can see the presentation. It is posted.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so we're going to go through the HOMEARP allocation plan, and we're going to talk a little bit about community leadership and what part that plays in the process for both HOMEARP, but also in general when it comes to applying for state and federal grants. So we're going to talk about the HOMEARP program. We're going to talk about the amount of money that we have set aside, and we're going to talk about how you can apply for it. So we have predominantly two pots of money that we're going to be providing grant funds out of. The first one is the non-congregate shelter development portion, and we are getting ready to release that NOFA towards the end of May, 1st of June, and we have $8.7 million. The second part is the affordable rental housing construction, which will be a layer on top of the tax credit program, and we have a little more than $64 million for that. So let's talk a little bit about affordable rental housing. The only real significant portion of money that is available for affordable housing development is our LIHTC program, which is the tax credit program. And within the tax credit program, we are going to layer another layer of funding on top of that for HOMEARP. The requirements are going to be that 70% of the HOMEARP units must be qualifying populations and 30% low income. Okay, a qualifying population is going to be families that have 0 to 30% of area median income. Okay, so these are people who are on Social Security disability. These are people who are receiving Social Security retirement benefits. These are people who are the poorest residents that we serve and require wraparound services. So the application periods will start in the 2024 round, which is this time next year. We can pay up to 100% of the cost on those units that are HOMEARP units, and there will be project-based rental assistance to help cover the cost of the monthly operating rent. So let's talk a little bit about how tax credits work. If you have a house that you're wanting to buy and it's $100,000, your mortgage right now would be about $700 a month. If someone gave you $70,000 as a down payment and they reduced the amount of the mortgage to $30,000, your monthly mortgage payment would drop to $200 a month. Now, on top of that, if someone gave you the $20,000 to pay down, you would only be financing $10,000 and your monthly mortgage payment would be $70 a month. And that is what the tax credit program does. It takes the total cost of building the units in the development, and it pays down about 65 to 70% of the total cost of construction, so that the debt on the property that has to be financed is much lower than if you were going to go out and just build market rate apartments. And then HOMEARP further pays down the debt so that you're really only financing somewhere between 10 and 20% of the cost of development, which means that the rents that you take in every month, only a small portion of those are now going to have to go towards paying down the mortgage on the property every month until the debt's paid off of it. The rest of it can go towards operations. So what does that mean? Well, first of all, tax credit properties are affordable housing. Typically, you're going to see 1 bedroom start at about $550 a month, 2 bedrooms start at about $650 a month, and 3 bedrooms start at about $750 a month. And so you're really talking about a market rate or just below market rate type housing that we then make more affordable because it's not carrying as much debt. So they can afford to have lower rents, which makes it more affordable for people who are making about 50% of the area median income. So typically you're going to be looking at families that are making somewhere between 50 and 60% of area median income. Can you mute everybody for me? Thank you. Okay, so next week in our office hours, we're going to dig a little bit more deeper into what that means and how that's calculated so that you can see specifically, you can go and look up specifically in your area what that income range would be so that you can get a better understanding of who in your community really needs this housing and if it is a good fit. It's not necessarily a good fit for every community, but for communities that have leveraged this well, they have seen a real improvement in the quality of life of, average Americans who are working every day to take care of their families. So when we did our impact report for 2022, one of the things that we did was we took a look at a sampling of tax credit developments across the state. And we asked those management companies, tell us who some of the larger employers are for the residents who live there. And then we mapped it. And as you can see from the logos on this map, our residents are working for Bluebird, making our school buses, Publix, which I personally love, Amazon, Walmart, FedEx. You have the Federal Law Enforcement Center that's down on the coast. And so it is a broad range. And this is just a small sampling of who our residents are working for. This is workforce housing. So the second piece is non-congregate shelter. We are in the process of working on the NOFA and getting it published towards the end of this month. This year will be the first application. This is a brand new grant. It is for shelter construction. So if you have a shelter that is operating in your community that has a waiting list or does not have enough beds, this would be a grant that you need to consider. It requires that they be private bedrooms with access to a private bath. So that is a lockable door. Congregate sheltering like you would see in barrack style is not allowable under this. It can cover the cost of construction of a new structure or acquisition rehab, and you can do conversion of existing properties. So if you have an older motel in your downtown that you want to convert, or you have an older school that you want to convert, these would be good applications for the non-congregate shelter grant funds. It cannot cover operating expenses. So you have to have an established operating stream that is an existing operating stream for your current shelter operations and can grow to absorb the new units that you want to construct. And you have to be able to pay for that for the compliance period of 15 years. What we have found as we've talked to communities is that the people who have shelters that are in need, it is very clear that that shelter needs additional bed space. And for those that don't, this is not the right fit for them. And so if it rings a bell, if you have a sheltering provider in your community that you think would be interested in adding more beds, now is the time for them to get in touch with us, take a look at our website, fill out our notice of intent to apply, and be prepared for the NOFA to come out. The single best way is to sign up for our listserv and to get on our newsletter. And I'm going to have the link for that prepared for you at the end. So for communities that are trying to work out what their needs are, who their subpopulations that they need to serve are, and what their housing needs are within their community. The single best program in the state is the Georgia Initiative for Community Housing. It has been around for more than 20 years. It takes in 5 communities every year and puts you through a 3-year educational program. And it is just really a stellar program. It's through the University of Georgia. It has support through the Carl Vinson Institute, Georgia Power, the EMCs, DCA, the Georgia Municipal Association, and the Association of County Commissions of Georgia. If you would like information, they are taking applications currently, and this QR code will take you out to their website, but you can also Google Georgia GICH, G-I-C-H, and it will pull up the Fanning website and the Department of Consumer and Family Sciences at the University of Georgia so that you can see more information. So HOMEARP was designed to be a community-driven process. This is not a top-down grant. This is you do the work, figure out what your needs are, figure out what you're trying to accomplish, and then you look at this grant and you determine whether or not one of these 2 programs fits within your mission and the goals that you establish. It is not a chase the money and try to get the money to fit your community. It is figuring out what your community need is and then applying for the grant to facilitate it. Part of that process is that you need to be looking at what your data is. You need to understand not only what the perception is of what's going on in your community, but what the reality is that is backed up by data. These are some of the areas where you can get started learning what your community's data looks like. The American Community Survey, which is through the census, is probably the single best starting place to get data on where your community is and what's going on and how the people in your community break down demographically. You also want to start by looking at your subpopulations. So under this grant, we have multiple subpopulations that we can serve. It includes addiction recovery, adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, reentry from criminal justice, mental health, domestic violence, veterans, youth aging out of foster care. Once you determine which groups within your community and the services that are provisioned for them are the best match for housing and your housing needs, then you can start to work with your community partners. We're going to talk a little bit about what that needs to look like, but I will start by telling you that if you do not already have a collaborative meeting that you're having once a month in your community, then you need to go ahead and start putting a list together and figuring out who those partners are and getting them to the table, because we are hearing more and more that if you want to compete for these grants, you want to compete for these funds, you must make sure that you have people at the table on a regular basis. The days of in-kind letters that you email over very quickly to the head of an agency and say, I need an in-kind letter for X amount of dollars, and they send it back to you, and there's really never a conversation, those days are starting to come to an end. You're going to need to show time well spent at the table, who was there, and the conversations that you are having to be able to really compete for these dollars. And that's across the board. That's not just HOMEARP.